What is up? Welcome to Defense Diaries. I am your host, Bob Mata. I am joined by my fabulous, fantastic, heroic co-host, Bill Dorsch.
Wow.
What's up, Bill?
Hey, good to be back. Well, I had a good time in London, though, I have to admit that. But getting back to work is important to both of us. So here we are.
Yeah, we did. We had a great time in London. It was nice to be able to kind of bookend that trip with being able for me and Allie and the girls to be able to explore that just unbelievably beautiful, majestic, historic city of London. It was something else. And thank you to all the subs and listeners and viewers out there that sent us so many fantastic tips and places to visit, and I used a majority of them. So I think the only thing that I really didn't take advantage of, we had one subscriber that had that works for one of the rail lines out there. I think Avante is the rail line that she worked with, and she had offered if we were going to be using that line to go anywhere, probably longer distances than the tube would typically take you, that she was going to upgrade us to first class. So unfortunately on this trip, I didn't get to use that lovely perk, but I'm extremely thankful and grateful that she made the offer, and plan on using it in the future. So, so this was your first CrimeCon, man.
I really did not know what to expect, but it was really, really a pleasure. Not only, of course, meeting the other podcasters and now having that connection. The people who ran the event were spectacular. And most importantly, Bob, the fans, those that came there Saturday and Sunday. And I was really busy at the table, Bob. They kept coming one after another. And I was, I brought my book out there in the bookstore. Ben at the bookstore sold my book, Omnipotent, Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And it turned out, from what I'm told, it was the second highest in sales.
Boom. Look at that.
Yeah. So I did a lot of book signings. And the second book on the Guevera stuff, I'm rushing. I'm trying to get it out by the end of November. And I'll let the fans know about the pre-order very soon. But the fans there, Bob, you had a lot of name recognition and people right away. They've been following you.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
God, so that was a good time to be able to get your picture taken with the people and just discuss the cases.
Yeah, and it was great for me because having Bill at the table, CrimeCon US is significantly bigger in terms of foot traffic. I think they have they cap over 5,000 people there, and it's a massive conference, and there are a lot of people. Talk about a constant flow. It's exhausting. It's 3 days. You're really chained to the table. In London, they really gave us a lot of time to kind of catch our breath, where it was nice because when they would have speaking engagements in the different like rooms, it would clear out. Like all the podcast row would clear out completely. So it was like that was our chance to kind of catch our breath and relax. But like for me personally, I really, really loved having you there because like I just left Bill at the table.
Yeah, you
So
did. But
like
then, Bob, you were a big show there. I mean, you were on the big stage with Chris
yeah, it
Hansen
was
there.
great.
And by the way, uh, contact with the event people there. I think next year you and I are going to be on the big stage with Gacy and with Guevara both.
I love it, man. We'll blow some minds. We'll blow
The
some
interest is
minds.
big. The
Yeah.
interest is big. So, it's the truth. Tell the story truthfully and let people decide.
Yeah, I mean that's it, man. It's so and people were loving you. You know, it was like Bill when he signed his first book, like somebody had bought the book at the bookstore and she came back to the table. She's like, "Oh, would you sign my book?" He's like, "Of course, of course." Then he was looking for a pen and we found him a pen and he just signed. He's like, "What's your name?" And he signed her name and then he just signed Bill Dorsch. And like, he gave her the book back. He said, "Thank you so much for buying the book. I hope you enjoy it." And she left. I'm like, "Bill, you got to write something in there, man. Like you gotta have an inscription that you write in there." So what did you land on? Like so all the next books you like all the rest of the signings that you did, you always put that inscription. What was it? It was
Well, I
good.
think that the thing that I wrote mostly after that was I wrote, "Beware, there are monsters who are walking among us."
True
And
story.
some people said I think I'm going to have a nightmare, but but it is true. Gacy, which we spent so much time talking about, the interest is still so big about that man because nobody knows the whole story. How does a man in a big city like Chicago get so many young men to come into his house and become his victims? And why didn't the police? That was a big question from a lot of people to me. Why did he succeed for so many years? Why didn't the police in Chicago? Why didn't they connect him to any of these missing kids? What was wrong? And I went in to explain as best I could at the times as they were, and the fact that one of the reasons after Gacy, of course, like I said, I had dinner at Gacy's house. I didn't know he was a killer. Nobody knew he was a killer till he was arrested.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, every politician that knew him and had been to his house, had dinner with the man, phone calls with the man, buddy type of stuff. Suddenly, everybody's scattered, because you got to put distance between you, John Gacy, and that house.
For sure.
That's why photos of the parties had to disappear. Things like that.
For sure. For sure.
Like I said, when things go bad, the first persons you save in government is yourself.
Always.
And
Always.
damn the victims, damn the families, the parents of the kids that went missing. I mean, any investigator walking into that case, if you never handled a homicide before, one of the first things you want to do is if you've got all these missing kids and, John Gacy's hiring all these people, you want to get his list of kids, people, everybody who ever worked for that man. And you have to start trying to find out if they're dead or alive.
Yep.
You got to trace them all down. If you don't seek them out, you're not doing a good job. And I want to know why.
Yeah.
But we know the reasons why now.
Yeah, we know now.
They wanted to hide the fact that Chicago, big city, we can't have this kind of crime. It doesn't look good on the stage. People want to come here for conventions, for vacations, things like that. We don't want this in the news every day. So they rushed the guy to trial. They rushed the case to trial and never did make it known that there was accomplices to this.
No.
If only they had done a real investigation, Bob, it would all been wrapped up then. It's harder to do 25, 35, 40 years later.
Oh,
but we got it done.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And with, the accomplice thing, it was mind-blowing to me, and I went I talked to Kunkel on the podcast about it. I asked him flat out about the whole, like, why didn't you charge Cram and Rossi? I mean, you had enough. Like, I mean, but it, at the very least, they could have charged him with aiding and abetting,
Oh,
after the fact, like with even just the digging of the ditches was enough. And with Rossi, they had more. They
oh
had
God.
you
Yeah,
know
and don't forget on the first day that they arrested Gacy, one of the first questions he had to the police is Rossi and Cram here? They were involved, you know?
exactly.
Okay, would that
Exactly.
sort of set off a light bulb? Maybe we ought to talk and consider these people seriously. But now we know why they didn't consider Michael Rossi seriously.
Yeah.
There was a connection there.
Yeah, it's strange. I posted on my TikTok account, which is relatively big. It's like I've got 76,000 followers on TikTok.
Oh,
So I was making some heavy content for that for a while, and then I stopped. And I recently posted a short talking about Rob Peast when he went missing, that I think that I talked
yeah,
about during one of our more recent lives, and it did really well over there. It got like 100,000, views. It started to go viral, and it still surprises me that like people are like, oh, they should make a documentary about this. I'm like, dude, this podcast that I have, like I tell the whole no documentary even comes close to this podcast that I've put together, 36 episodes, So it's like there's always new audiences out there, and especially for younger generations, they just don't know the story like we do. It's like you
right,
come out there, and if you start talking, like if you make the victims known, like that's kind of the key to this whole thing, is really focusing on the victims. If you make it victim centric as opposed to, which is what I've really been trying to do. I mean, that was my primary goal with the Gacy season that I did. It was I didn't want to talk about Gacy at all. Like you don't really hear about any of Gacy's background and history until I get to the trial, which I brought it in through testimony. Like the 33 episodes that I did before that really were focusing on the victims, the investigation, the arrest, and then we got to the trial. And it was like, because I was playing the tapes, it's like you were going to get to hear my father trying to prep Gacy for trial. And like, I figured that was enough Gacy, and then obviously I did some voice acting, and, my Gacy impression was, it was, it was pretty good. But, like I would take a little creative license in some of the situations, especially like with Tim McCoy, because I wanted to try to give it, from the view of the perspective of the victims, as opposed to from
hmm,
Casey's perspective, like just that kind of like horror of getting sucked in to this guy's vortex,
yeah,
and ultimately ending up being a victim of his, and just how terrifying that would have been, to realize, oh my God, like this guy's gonna kill me, and it was like all these kids went through that, and it was just, the guy was just a monster. It was like
yeah,
Tim McCoy was the only one he ever used a weapon wherein he stabbed him, and his story was always that Tim McCoy, he'd woke up and Tim McCoy was standing above him with a knife. There's no way that happened. This kid was like,
right,
he'd come back, he was living up in Minnesota, and he had taken a Greyhound bus to go back to Iowa to celebrate with his what would have been his graduating class from high school.
right.
That was literally why he went. And on the way back, when the Greyhound always stops at, the Greyhound station in
Yeah,
Chicago.
downtown Randolph Street.
Yep. And there was just a gap in time from when the bus was going to take off, a few hours, went out to explore, and Gacy snatched him up, man. And it was like, that kid just was, like it's all their stories were just heartbreaking. And it was like kind of like if you just follow what a lot of these documentaries have gotten into about Gacy over the years, it really just skimmed the surface of the victim stories. And I really wanted to make it a point to really try to humanize who these kids were. And
Yeah,
I think
definitely. And that's
yeah,
that's important because the misconception presented by a lot of people who've done books and in these podcasts is that all these victims were, gay, transsexuals, and it's not true. Most of these kids were lured to Gacy by the offer of higher wages.
exactly,
I mean,
exactly.
I remember my first job downtown in Chicago when I was in high school, working as an usher at the State Lake Theater, gone now. But I think I got paid 60 cents an hour, Bob. 60 cents an hour.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So when a guy comes along and starts in the early 70s, he's offering like $5 an hour when everybody else is getting 225, it drew these kids in,
Yeah.
and then for Gacy, his intent was to bring them into his lair. That house of his was a cage. You
Yep.
know, he wasn't into a quick kill. He was a masochist. He was there for the torture. That was entertainment.
Yep.
And how horrific that had to be to those poor kids. I mean, even like when he invited me back there, Bob, knowing I was a policeman, I almost did go back there one day, thinking, oh, yeah, I'll stop by. John said, come over, have a beer, watch the ball game,
Yeah.
But he knows I'm a cop. He knows I got a gun. But if I sit down in that chair and suddenly he pulls out a gun on me first and I don't know his true intention, I'm just a victim.
Oh, 100%. Well, and like he looked at you in a couple of different ways. He looked at you potentially as a victim somewhere down the road, but on the front end of it, I mean that like the way that he operated is he ingratiated himself with local politicians,
Yeah.
local attorneys, local cops. Like he wanted to be that guy to where no one would ever sniff him as
Well,
being
everybody in politics loved the guy. I
I'm
mean,
saying. Like that was
he would
not.
ingratiate himself. I mean, you need some work around your house? You need some repair work? Here, I'll do it for you. Yeah, I won't charge you.
Oh yeah, and he'd have the parties. I mean, he
Yes.
was like that was like it's the concept of keeping your enemies close.
He
you
ran
know?
he ran the yearly Polish parade, you know.
Yeah.
That's how close he was to downtown to the mayor's office and things like that. He got his picture taken with Jimmy Carter's wife, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
What a security check they did on him, right?
Yeah, that was rough. That was that was rough.
But nobody knew when he came back to Chicago. Born here, but when he went to Iowa, he had the sodomy conviction, went to prison, got out early, came back. Nobody knew.
No one knew.
But
Yeah.
if they would have checked the first two times when he got arrested in the suburbs, if they would have checked when these kids made complaints against him, they would have found that he had this felony conviction. But back then, to do that, you would have had to get on the phone and call. But who knows to call Iowa if you're in Chicago? You're going to call Chicago, but they're probably never going to know about that Iowa conviction.
Exactly.
So he slips through. But now you can't do that with computers. You get connected.
Exactly.
The cell phone connects you. We got towers that can tell where your phone is. At least they can trace you across the country hour by hour.
No
So
question.
hopefully it doesn't happen like that. But you got to be careful. Young kids, they do not understand the real intentions of some people they meet. They're tricked. They're fooled. They're vulnerable.
Well, yeah.
As a parent, you can't be with your child 24/7.
Right. And that kind of like that always dovetails into that conversation about, parents that are overly protective of their kids when they're young in terms of, they don't want them to even hear about bad things that go on in the world. They kind of want to keep them insulated from that, which I can understand. I mean, there's why have your kids worrying about, the problems of the world during that time in their lives when they should be enjoying themselves and being happy and playing and be carefree and not have to worry about all the stresses that come along with being an adult. But at the same time, you can make the argument that, look, you've got to prepare your kids for the reality of what's out there, and it's like, I think there's kind of like an age, I think Allison and I probably started doing it, kind of letting our kids know beyond, like the four walls of our home, what was going on out there. And, we were always telling our kids, look, there's bad people out there. I mean, there's good people and there's bad people, and you have to be vigilant about, who you talk to. And, you have to just assume that there's going to be people out there that may want to do you harm, because I want them to be aware. I don't want them going out with blinders into the world thinking that everything's just, puppy dog and ice cream cones. And, it's just like, that's not it. And it's one of those things where, it's to the parents' discretion. I suppose there's no wrong or right answer, but, like I have friends and, family, even in terms of how they raise their kids, or kind of like keep their kids sheltered from the storm, so to speak, out there in the world. And it's just one of those things. I'm like, man, are you prepping your kid for reality? Because reality's pretty ugly out there, or it can be.
Well,
So,
going back to when I was, I think, 11 years old, 1955, the Schuessler Peterson case, the three boys that were found naked and laying off the side of Irving Park Road, that had gone missing, and their bodies were found a day or so later. And I was friends with Tony and John Schuessler. They lived 1 block away from me. I cut across Elston Avenue, and then I was on their street, and I was in their home many a time. But I remember being in their house, not in their house. I remember being with them in a larger group of us guys, being together in the morning of the day they disappeared, and then of course, their bodies are found, but the case doesn't get solved until 1994, which I was very happy to be a detective in Area 5 when one of the culprits, Kenny Hansen, was arrested and brought in and later sentenced to 300 years. So that is when, if you remember, Bob, after that murder, the Anderson murders, those were a couple of girls from the South Side. They were murdered. Right then, it became the saying from the parents was, "You be home when the street lights go on." Remember that? You come home when the street lights go on. That's your curfew. That was your family-imposed curfew that was set on all of us. Because suddenly it wasn't such an innocent community out there. We didn't know who the monsters were.
Right. That was it. That was it. And it was like, I mean, my entire childhood, my kids live a vastly different life, and we live 40 miles west of the city. We're in a pretty safe area out here, with low crime, and it's still, it's not like it was. I mean, like, I was like 7, 8, 9 years old. I was a latchkey kid. I literally had the key hanging around my neck. My mom had to work after my parents divorced, so it was like I'd come home, pour a bowl of cereal, go out, play with my friends. On the weekends, it was like the minute I woke up, poured a bowl of cereal, Saturday morning cartoons, and then I went out and played until it was dark, and my mom had no clue where I was. It was like I was in the neighborhood somewhere. I had my bike, and I would go, and we'd go play, stickball or whatever, football, whatever we were doing, exploring, whatever. It was like it was just different times completely. And that all changed, man. It's like
there were no school shootings back then either.
That's right.
Right. Now it's no one's surprised when it happens anymore.
Yeah.
We didn't need policemen in schools before.
Right.
Kids were more respectful of the teachers, and the teachers had control of the classrooms. Now, if you yell at the kid, the parents are coming in and complaining.
Yeah.
You know, maybe the kid needed yelling at. Maybe you should have get more of that at home. But
I
now
mean,
we have to go through metal detectors to go into the high schools in the city of Chicago. We have to be searched for weapons.
yeah,
You know,
I think in my last year at Oak Park which was 88, they brought in metal detectors like in 1988. That was because that was, I think, when did Columbine happen? Was that 86? I want to say that
oh,
was that. I don't even know when that
oh,
was.
that was later, much later than that,
Was
I
it?
think. Yeah.
Hold on. I gotta
Mhm.
look it up. I can't even remember. Maybe that was 96, some
Yeah,
shit like
that's
that.
more like
Let's
it.
see. 99 that was.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was like, but yeah, in Oak Park bordered the Austin neighborhood, but like which is a rough neighborhood, but it was like Oak Park had this it was weirdly insulated from just like like for as urban of a suburb as it was just a great place to grow up. I loved Oak Park. I loved going to high school there. I really wanted to raise my kids there, but that's neither here nor there. So, all right, enough about Gacy. We could yap about that all night.
Yeah.
So, our plan was originally to have a guest on. Unfortunately, Bill and I both being on kind of a short week, really didn't get much of a chance to get anything scheduled. I was in London until the weekend, and then I got back, and neither of us were really diligent about scheduling somebody for tonight. We've got a bunch of people lined up for the Guevara stuff. Um, I think in one of the things that's becoming pretty evident to Bill and I is as I've been reaching out to a lot of the people that have been exonerated, many of them are still in the process of their 1983 civil claims. So where they're suing for the wrongful incarceration, and their attorneys are telling them, look, like at this point, we don't want you putting anything out on the streets in terms of we don't want you saying anything. We don't want, because like the city's going to be combing through looking for content for things that will help reduce claims, so anything that can be said on any of these lives theoretically could be used in depositions and can then be used to negotiate lower amounts. So most of their attorneys are like, you know what, just keep it quiet until we get these things settled, and then after that, then you guys can go do whatever you want to do. So, and obviously with the number of exonerees and wrongfully convicted people, there's still quite a few of them that are recently exonerated that are still just getting like kind of into the process of their civil rights claims. So, like those folks will probably be a wait, but we've got some great people lined up though, don't we?
Oh, sure do. Sure do. I'll tell you, I got off the phone a little bit ago tonight talking to Jennifer Bonjean. Jennifer, a very well-known attorney out of New York who's been working on the wrongful convictions all across the country, but she's got a bunch of Chicago cases with Guevara and company. And I say and company because Guevara was not alone. And it has been a pleasure for me to work with her on cases when she contacted me for help. And it was also, I had cases that I had worked on my own for the families of some of these kids. And I brought those cases to her and other attorneys and to the Northwestern Innocence group too. So they took on the cases that I brought to them. So Jennifer is going to be coming on with us, and she probably, because of her connection to so many other Guevara cases, is going to give you people a very good insight into what was wrong with law enforcement and the justice system in the city of Chicago. And we can look forward to that. And Bob, you're going to be the one that contacts her and sets her up for that
Yeah,
date.
I'm actually gonna push for next Tuesday. So
Okay,
give me that contact info ASAP because
sure.
I
And
reach out to
because
these folks right
she's
away.
got so many people, maybe some of those people, even though they have cases pending, maybe she can bring them in with her on further shows, future shows.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you remember when we played the clip of the upcoming documentary, uh Jennifer Bongine was in there. She was the badass lawyer who does just a ton of wrongful conviction work, and you guys are gonna love her.
Oh yeah, you should, if you ever want to go to a court trial, yeah, that you want to go to a one where she's involved. I'll tell you, she's really something in a courtroom.
Yep. She's her and Allie are cut from the same cloth. So if you guys love Allie, you're gonna definitely love Jennifer Bongine. They're like peas in a pod, just two just badass women lawyers who are out there really
Yeah,
fighting for justice, on the other side of it, because you always hear me talking about it. There's all different forms of justice in the legal system. It's not all just getting all the bad guys. Sometimes they get the wrong guys, and we've got to get them out because that's no justice for anybody. So that'll be interesting. And then I think we're going to be trying to get Melissa Segura on.
yeah,
Who
Melissa. I reached out to her. Of course, she's in New Mexico and she's busy. She's been writing her own book on the mothers of the Gacy victims. All right, and that's going to be a very good book. I mean, I worked with Melissa maybe 3 years, and she would go with me to the homes of various witnesses and families of some of these people who were incarcerated. So it was a pleasure working with her and setting her up on some of this stuff. So she's going
Yeah,
to be very good. She's a well-known writer, very
she's
accomplished writer, and people, you're going to love her.
yeah.
She's going to be able to
If
condense
you
it for you.
yeah,
You know,
she'll be amazing. And if you guys remember when we couldn't get Bill couldn't figure out his sound, or no, his video. We got his sound, but Bill's video wasn't up. And I read that really long article. It was a BuzzFeed article. That was written by Melissa. So
yeah.
she writes for BuzzFeed. And she's always like, the things that she writes about are always super topical, super important issues that are social issues. She's
She
an
does
ass.
her homework. She does her homework, man. She knows
Yeah.
what she's talking about. When she puts on that paper, you know that she's done the investigation. So, also,
No.
we're going to have on Esther Hernandez.
Yes.
And Esther, you talked to her too. She was again, because she had two sons who were arrested for the same homicide. Okay, by Guevara.
Yep.
Well, Majanowski was behind that one mostly, but Guevara and company and Majanowski went to put a case on two of her sons, and both of them served 20 some years or more. As a matter of fact, I worked on their case at the end and re-investigated it and contacted witnesses and got information from them. And I believe that was helpful in getting them recently exonerated. So she's going to come on, but because of the pending litigation, she was fearful about actually talking about the case. So I said, listen, I think best as a mother, not only of one person who's been wrongfully convicted, but two sons who've been wrongfully convicted, I'd like you to talk about it as what you went through as a mother, knowing that you have your children wrongfully arrested and incarcerated for all these years. So she's going to be able to tell people about the structure, how women gathered together and became a strong group of protest against Guevara and others who were putting these cases into the courtroom. And she'll talk about all the events that they've run, the protests that they've done, all the court appearances that they've done. And I think people are going to, I mean, any mother, father who love their kids, like you said, we want to keep them safe from the bad guy. But God, when the bad guy's government, that's really a tough one to handle because, like I say, um, that's why I titled my first book "Omnipotent: The Power of God." You know,
Yeah.
government on earth assumes the power of God. They can make you or break you. They make the
100%.
laws. They tell you what's right or wrong.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah,
and then,
it's terrifying, really.
yeah, it is. And then I'm going to have another guy, a personal friend of mine now. I love the guy, Roosevelt Miles. I took on that case for Jennifer Bonjean. Um, he was arrested, lived in the 15th district of Chicago, arrested for a homicide that happened over there when he was a young man. He had alibis that he wasn't there, and still he was convicted after witnesses were pressured into identifying him. Well, I was able to years later locate the most important female witness to that case. There were two real witnesses to that case, and one of them had died, but the one that I had to search for and went back a couple times to talk to her. Finally got her, as reluctant as she had been at the beginning, to reach out and contact Jennifer Bonjean. And
Yeah.
that's all you needed. Jennifer was able to get that case back in a courtroom. That case, Bob, his appeals had sat on the desk of the judge who prosecuted his case for over 16 years with no movement at all.
It's crazy.
16 years it was there.
I mean, I say it's crazy, not in the sense that it's actually the norm, but it's crazy. It's like when you get sucked into the system with a conviction. I say, like, I don't know how many times I've said it, like it's on repeat, but it is literally like moving mountains to get out, to get it undone, to get the retrial, to get just the movement that you need is like near impossible, and there's just like, I mean, if I were to try to count since I started the podcast, how many people, prisoners have, like, I guess, like some prisons, they have access to computers so they can listen to podcasts. Like I've had so many inmates write me letters, asking me to look at their case. Like, and there's two angles to it. There's the shining a light on it angle in the hopes of getting somebody, especially if it's not an Illinois case where we're not barred to practice, some other state, hopefully getting some attorney that does wrongful conviction work to get interested in it. So it's like you really need to kind of shine the light on those cases. So it's like a lot of times for those cases, I'm like, and I frankly, like, I always want to help them, and it's hard to kind of vet what's good, what's not good in terms of cases that, like, maybe this is really a wrongful conviction. Cause I think that there's certainly people in prison that committed the crimes that are saying that they didn't commit the crimes,
Certainly.
which is not helpful to those that are actually innocent, that are, it's like that weighs it down. That makes it so much more difficult to kind of figure out, and makes every judge at the appellate court level and above more skeptical in terms of, who to believe and who not to believe. I mean, you'll get cases where judges are presented, which, with, in my estimation, just like lockdown exculpatory evidence that the person that's standing in front of them did not commit the crime, and they're just dug in, and you just can't convince them otherwise. It's like it's wild, man. So yeah, and I saw Afton put in the chat that tomorrow is wrongful conviction day, Bill. So that's
Yes, I know there's some big events in Chicago. I think Lovie and Lovie is having something. Northwestern just had something. I know I had invites, but it's kind of far to go.
yeah, it's a long trip for
But
you.
a lot of these exonerees are going to be there. One of my good friends, Jacques Rivera, he'll be there. He's actually doing a little bit of work for me, so I hope he succeeds. Anyway, but things.
Oh,
What's
wait,
that?
I So yeah, Jelani Day was a case that I was following pretty heavily. This is interesting. Like I think I was probably in the first year of the podcast when he was a young I think he was getting his master's at Illinois State. Uh Young guy went missing, young black guy, and down in Illinois State area, and he ends up going missing, and they couldn't find him for a pretty extended period of time, and they ultimately end up finding his body in a river. And down there, I think it was the Peru, Illinois, which is, I believe, still a sundown state, or a sundown city. Which, if you don't know what that means, that's essentially, that was always the rule: is if you weren't white and you were in a sundown town, that you had to get out of that town before the sun went down. Otherwise, bad shit was going to happen. That was the concept behind it. But apparently, Peru was, at least for a very long time, a sundown state, and I think that there's some people that think that it still is. But at any rate, the medical examiner ruled that it was accidental, and that they ended up coming up with some ridiculous theory that he drowned himself, which was crazy to me. So that's interesting, Betty. Do me a favor, like, let me know what Facebook group that is, because I'd actually like to go check that out. I was pretty heavily involved in that Facebook group for a long time, and we were all kind of trying to figure out what happened to Jelani. And I know that his family it was getting weird, because I think that some people had very kind of concrete ideas of what may have happened to him. And I think that his mother in particular was taking exception to, like, some of the concepts that people were throwing out there, including myself. Um, what are you offended by? Sorry, I'm bound to offend people occasionally. But like, it was just, it's one of those cases that really had me, like, up nights. Like, I was thinking about it. I'm like, man, what happened to him? Because they had him on video. He had bought some weed that morning legally at a dispensary, and then, they had him on camera leaving, and then he just kind of vanished off the face of the earth. Man, it was like a really, what's up, Caitlin? Good to see you, girl. It was. Are you in Peru? That's what they say. No, that's what they say. I'm not the one who said it. I'm just repeating what I've heard. Let's not pretend there's not a lot of racist towns in central and southern Illinois, because there are. That's just facts. I live here. Like, I've gone to school. I went to school in one of them. But maybe they've changed. Maybe they changed their ways. But that was definitely one of the things. So you guys have changed your ways in Peru. Good. That makes me very happy to know. That makes me very, very happy to know. So, like, I saw somebody on Twitter. She's got this kind of running post of a map of sundown towns, and, like, I was kind of going through the thread, and, like, people were getting super pissed off at her, because she was like, she had like towns that are, like, adamant that they're not sundown towns anymore, and people were, like, coming at her like, you've got old information. So if Peru's good, then I'll recant it. If they're not, coming after you. Don't be sundown towns. It's not a good way to be.
No.
It's really not. So what else is there? I think that with the Jelani Day thing. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to go check that out tonight after we get done with this live. I definitely want to see that. Thank you. So you got any Guevara stories that we haven't told in terms of your interactions with him, that we can kind of fill a little time here before we dip out?
Yeah, I want to, there's a whole, God, the cases I've worked on, Bob, there's so many, not only Chicago, Lake County, Wisconsin, things like that. One of the things wrong in the Guevara cases, and in a lot of these wrongful convictions, police can make mistakes. You can get bad information, but when it's intentionally putting people in prison by police officers, that's where you got to draw the line. I mean, my God. There's one case that I worked on when I first came back to Chicago. I did it, one of the first cases I worked on for Northwestern University. It didn't involve Guevara, but I got to tell you about this. There's a case with Daniel Taylor. I mean, this guy had the best alibi in the world when that murder happened. He was arrested and sitting in jail in the 19th district. Well, it was the 23rd district at that time. Incarcerated in jail and released, hours after the murder. But even with that evidence, he was still convicted and did, I don't know, it was maybe 15 years, 20 years before I got on the case. And we wound up, because I was a prior police officer, I had a little bit of an edge there. I was able to recognize some of the people that were helpful to me, and they gave me statements that confirmed that no, this guy was in jail, so they had to let him go. But I mean, what better alibi can you have, Bob?
I mean, that's pretty good.
This is a political city. If you know the right people, Gacy, he reached out to people. If you're Mayor Daley's nephew, nobody's bringing you to court anytime soon. 10 years is a pretty long time to wait for justice. Things like that. And but with Guevara, the things that were happening with him were noticeable, not only to me working beside him. I mean, even before the 1990 case where he brought in the two witnesses, I was able to see, like everybody, that something was really strange here. This guy was in gang crimes. Him and Majanowski were putting together cases that nobody else could solve. And there's a month, 2 months later, they're walking in with witnesses that nobody else knew about. They're walking in after getting a phone call, and they're writing reports. And so you're forced as a detective to follow up on it. And but they're doing all the casework. They're the ones going to court. They're the ones, you're not getting subpoenas. And why not? You should be part of that case, but you're not even asked to testify. And these guys are getting convicted. But when I was in Area 5, I would see them come in, take their prisoner into a witness room, and half an hour later they're walking out with a signed confession. That's getting a written confession. Getting an oral admission is hard enough, but getting the person to put his name on a piece of paper, and says, yeah, I did it, that's rare. It really is rare. Okay, because most people know their rights and right to an attorney and a swift counsel and protect yourself. But the only ones protected in the Guevara cases are the detectives who've all taken the Fifth Amendment. I mean,
and Afton had asked that question, Bill, and I know, Bill, like we hear Guevara's name all the time, but Afton had asked, and I put it up on the screen. Who are the other cops? We know that there are other cops that worked with them.
Well, those most identified in all these cases were Steve Gars, Ernie Helverson in particular, involved in many, many of the cases, even before Guevara became a detective. I was aware of that. I saw what he was doing. A Sergeant Mingy's involved in a lot of this stuff. These were some of these people like Mingy. I really was fooled by him. I have to admit, I trusted the man for a long time. And, I'll tell you a story. I can't, because it was just me and the sergeant and two other detectives in this incident. I was asked to meet at a restaurant with the sergeant and another detective. So I and my partner walked in, sat down with them, and suddenly the sergeant says, Bill, I don't know what to do with this. We were out riding through Humboldt Park, and we saw this group of guys and wanted to talk to them, and they took off running. So chased them, but they got away from us. But one of the guys threw this down, and he pulls out this big white envelope, and he pushes the envelope across towards me. And I'm looking at the envelope, and he says, "Bill, I don't know what to do with this." I said, "Well, what's in it?" So he opens it up and fans through it, and it's loaded with money.
Cash
Money. He says, "What do I do with this, Bill?" Pushes it a little further towards me. And I said, Sarge, I've been a policeman for a while now. I've chased a lot of people. I've seen them throw down guns. I've seen them throw down narcotics, but never in my life have I ever seen anybody throw money away. I said, "You do with it whatever you want." Okay. So I didn't want to believe it was what it was. Okay. But a few months later, getting close to my retirement, suddenly I don't even have a partner anymore. Now I'm working alone in Area 5. So that became kind of unsettling. But I knew when it was time to go. And I moved, but I never, ever, ever forgot what was going on over there. I mean, people being held for days, not even being on an arrest. Nobody knows they're there. Being denied defense counsel when requested, access to family or of telephone to make contact, violation of people's rights. That went on a lot with Guevara and company. And I say and company because even after Majanowski went to prison, after he was identified, I think what was it, 2001, and I'd already been gone for 7 years, the federal government took him down and sentenced him to life in prison for working and developing his own drug connection and selling drugs. Even with him going to prison, it didn't stop. It was still going on in Area 5. Now Guevara was at the head of it.
Yeah.
But the city let it go because they were clearing cases. No, they kept a blind eye to what was really going on. And like I said, we're going to have witnesses coming in and talking about the payoffs that they were forced into making to Majanowski and Guevara.
And
going into the police
Guevara, it was his own community. It was like his own people that he was just putting in prison on murder beefs that they were innocent of, and he just didn't give a shit, man. The guy was like, you think about murderers that kill, when you listen to Gacy, and he's just got no remorse, and he's just like how different is Guevara really?
might even be worse. You're incarcerated. It's not a homicide, but you're taking a life away from somebody for forever. I mean, he put people on murders on the death row waiting for execution.
It's crazy.
I mean, Marilyn Molero, wait till you get her on.
I can't wait.
She was a young lady with children sentenced to life in prison for a double murder. Not life in prison, sentenced to be executed for a double murder. Her and two other young girls, 16, 17 years old. They were innocent, but Helverson, Guevara, they set them up. They could pick you out of at random and put a case on you and tell you, I want you to be a witness to a homicide that occurred. And if you don't do it, I may charge you with that crime. And they did do that stuff. People were really afraid of them. I mean, being threatened, being beaten. Sometimes they paid money to the witnesses. But everybody, the young kids on the street, were all afraid of them. And if you're in a street gang in Chicago, being tagged as a gang member in Chicago was very easy. You could be from Mississippi or Florida visiting your relative in Humboldt Park. And because the police drove by and stopped you in the gang neighborhood and they wrote down on their identification card your vital information, but because you're standing there on the corner with people who are suspected gang members, you are now a gang member. No Maybe doubt. This is the first time you ever came to Chicago, but now you're with the wrong people and you're a gang member. And that's going to go on your file. And then when these cases went into the courtroom, how often it was brought up. We know he's a gang member, but they had no conscience. They had the power of the badge. You know, it's you know, you stop cars, you stop people, you demand identification, you want answers, things that, you know, and if anybody else comes up to you on the street and tries to get that information, you're going to say, hey, buddy, you know,
Go
take a
fuck
walk.
yourself.
You know, right. But I mean, with the police,
Yeah.
you're intimidated already because of presence, the
Right.
mere presence.
I try to explain to people all the time, just like the amount of power that they have. And it's like, yeah, badge drunk is from their perspective, but like the reality is that they actually do have that power. Like they have the power to change lives in the blink of an eye. You know, I mean, it's like you would not believe how many ag bat charges that I saw come through my office where cops would just say, "Oh, cops could say anything." Like, "Oh, they tried to grab my wrist, ag bat to a cop. That's it. It's a heavy felony, you know." And it's like they're back. If it's not on video, who are they going to believe? Are they going to believe the defender? Or are they going to believe a cop? Nowadays, they're going to be prone to kind of actually listen to both sides of the story before they just automatically believe the cop. But back in the day, I mean, cops would just say that shit all the time. They'd throw ag bats on people all the time, and there was no recourse. And it is almost impossible to beat it at trial because unless there's eyewitnesses there, it's your word against the cop, you know, and or in his partner. You know what I mean? It's such a scary proposition that people just like that you know just base their reality on what they see on Law and Order and shit that's not real. Just have no idea of what is really going on out there. And and again, it's not to say that there is some kind of like just constant like nefarious network of cops that are operating all over the place because there are tons of great cops. There just are, you know. And like if you ask any cop, if I were to ask Bill like what he hates most, he'd probably tell you a bad cop, you know, because bad cops give good cops a bad name, you know, because like out of any profession, even more than lawyers,
You know,
bad
and
cops like
but
they taint the whole thing for you guys.
but you know, there are times, Bob, when we have to put our hands on people. All right.
Sure, of course.
And we come to work every day. We want to go home as we came, you know,
For
but you
sure.
never know what's around the corner. And there are going to be those incidents where you have to get physical because of the resistance. I mean, I remember one time in a courtroom, the defense attorney, I can't remember the type of case, but he said, Officer Dorsch, did you batter my client here? Did you hit him? Did you beat him, my client? And I says in front of the judge, yes, sir, I did. I hit him as many times as I could, as hard as I could. And he was like, whoa, you know. And I says, and the judge said, what? Why? What? Why? I said, because he was hitting me. You know, the simple answer to the truthful question, you know. And so sometimes but cops are afraid now. They are really afraid to admit, even in a shooting. And I've had my own shootings when I was a policeman. All right. I shot a guy, Bob, that didn't have a gun. All right. But I didn't know that. I mean, I suspected he had a gun because he had just robbed a Jewel food store on Clark near Bryn Mawr. And I was in working the 20th district, and I responded. I was the first car at the scene. People were already out front from the store, employees and other people. And I said, you know, what happened? Where's the offenders? And they said, there's one guy, one black guy, and he robbed us. And the first question I have is, does he have a weapon? And, you know, 6, 7 people. Yeah, he's got a gun. We saw the gun, you know. So I took the clerk with me, got him in the car, got a description, drove a little bit, and saw 2 guys waving their hands and stopped the car. And they had chased them from the store. And when they got close to him, the guy stopped in the alley and he turned on the 2 guys that were chasing him and he pointed the gun at him and said, don't keep coming at me, man. And he threw the money that he had stolen back on the ground and took off running again. And hey, that's throwing money away. Yeah, he did. They recovered the money because they had been so close to him. And so I continued down to the end of the street, Ravenswood, where the railroad tracks and the cemetery are on the other side. And I left the kid in the car, and I went up on top of the hill and looked down the tracks both ways. Didn't see anybody running there, but I heard noise on the other side, Bob. So I crossed over the tracks and down below, running like not knowing where to go below, right near the fence to the cemetery. He looks up and he sees me and he starts to climb the fence. And I said, don't do it, man. Because, if you try to go over, I'm going to have to shoot you, putting the fear into him. I'm not going to shoot a guy in the back climbing over the fence. But he stopped. He did what I wanted him to do. He stopped. And then I said, now you come down from the fence and you come down slow. And I'm still at the top. He's now at the bottom. And I said, okay, put your hands on top of your head. And he did that. And I said, now I want you to go to your knees. And then he's not going to his knees. I repeated it again, go to your knees. Before I come down the hill, I want to make sure I had him stable. And suddenly he dropped the hand and he turned towards me and I shot him right away.
Shoo!
And I fired one shot, lucky I hit him, didn't kill him, wounded him severely, went down the hill, started searching him, looking for that gun that I know he's got because he just robbed the store, and not finding the gun. Now I call in that I've got the offender, he's shot, send me an ambulance, and other policemen are coming. And now they're all searching the area looking for the gun. Nobody's finding the gun around the railroad tracks where the shooting occurred. So, all right, tell the sergeant, give the sergeant my gun. I go into the police station. Now I got to do the round table where now I'm not doing the round table, but I'm the subject of the round table where all the bosses and the state's attorneys are there and they're interviewing me about what happened. I tell them about the shooting and not finding the gun and the seriousness of the crime. And, they said, which I knew because I understood the law, in fear of my life, with the knowledge I had from all these people that he had committed this robbery armed with a handgun, that when he refused to do what I told him and he made that sudden move to turn towards me, the only thing I could think of was my life is in danger. So I shot him. Okay. Everybody said, Bill, no gun, but good shooting. I'm walking out, leaving, sergeant's walking in, and he's got a gun. They found a family across the street from Ravenswood, found a gun laying on the grass on their property. The guy didn't even know the gun fell.
Wow.
Right. And he admitted it. He admitted he was shot in the hospital. The detectives went in to talk to him. They found out he had just gotten out of jail not long ago for a homicide. And he told them, yeah, I was going to shoot it out with the cop because I didn't want to go back. How much better can it get? The cops, they're afraid now. They're afraid. What if you shoot a guy and this happened? I mean, what's his name? Tom. Which I can't remember his last name now. Became a lieutenant in 14th District, and he wound up shooting two guys there. And they were armed at the time of the shooting, and the gun couldn't be found because there were so many other people around that one of them picked up and took off with the gun. So it's your word against everybody sometimes, But if you start making up stuff, that's where cops get in trouble.
Well, let me ask you this: Are you a fan of the body-worn cam?
Yes and no. I mean, it works. It gives the true picture only of what you're showing at that moment, but it doesn't tell you what happened before off camera, Yeah. So there's a lot missing from the truth of the matter. You're only getting the part where the cop comes on scene. All right. And in a chase, like you have the case in Chicago where the one kid with the gun known to have just done a shooting and he's chased down an alley and the cop shoots him just as he's throwing the gun down. It's split-second decisions. A quarterback in a football game, he throws a pass and it gets intercepted and everybody is yelling and screaming at him. Okay. All right. He wishes he didn't do it, but nobody got killed. It's a football game. In real life, police work, mistakes can cost lives. All right. But you're held accountable for it. Not like the quarterback who's going to be roasted in the newspaper, but they're trying to put you in jail.
Yeah.
So some cops now are so fearful. Like that, going back to the robbery and the shooting that I had, when we're searching for the gun, I had a friend of mine walk up to me and say, Billy, I got a gun. I can drop a gun. I said, don't do it. Don't do it. I know what the law is. I know I'm justified in this shooting. Don't complicate the matter. And how would it have looked later if I said, oh, yeah, they found this gun there, and now we got the sergeant walking in with another one?
Would have been bad, Bill.
Yeah. So, but coppers are afraid their whole career. You work in a factory. You put a product together wrong, and nobody knows about it. Somebody dies in an accident because of the product or something, But in police work, it's all public. It's instant information. You get a shooting, it's on television right away.
Yeah.
And so they criticize the copper right away. And I'm pro police, man. I love good police work. I had great people that mentored me. So I understand why they're afraid. The camera, the bad guys know about the camera too. How many people now on, if you watch YouTube and somebody's arrest situations, everybody's yelling. They're down on the ground. They're all yelling, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. This is education through news media,
Right. Right.
But the camera, it's harder now for cops to get the truth because witnesses don't want to be coming forward and talking to you, knowing that they've already been on camera. They're going to live in that neighborhood where this shooting occurred.
Right.
They were hard enough to find the witness when there weren't cameras. Okay. But now with the cameras there and the crowd being seen in the footage, nobody wants to cooperate with the police.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
I never thought about that angle of it.
So the closure rate is down for serious crimes. It's because witnesses are protecting themselves.
Yeah. That's interesting. I hadn't even thought of that angle at all. That's really interesting.
But
all right, we're wrapping it. We're calling it.
Wait, let me tell you something. I got to tell you about England. I was really surprised, Bob. I went to the Tower of London.
Yeah.
Did you go there?
Of course.
Okay. I went there to see the family jewels. Okay.
The family jewels. Hey.
But it wasn't what I thought. It was just a bunch of jewelry. Hey. And I got to tell you, there were a lot of people there. I was very happy to see that a lot of the security there and the uniformed guards dressed red uniforms with the big black hats. When they weren't marching and standing, they were all reading my book, Bob. They were all reading my book. But
as well they should be.
Being so lax as they were, I was able to abscond.
Wow.
Yeah, they don't. I don't think they even know it's gone, but they don't lock.
They know now, Bill. They know now.
They don't really lock the cabinets, and I was able to get away with. I don't know whose it was, but
it looks like
I'm putting it up on eBay.
I think who's. I think that's the Burger King's crown, man. I think that's whose crown that is. Yeah. Well, no, I loved the Tower of London. I thought it was just unbelievable. I loved every second of it. The Ravens in there were so cool. I had gotten a couple of really good videos and pictures of the Ravens, and I posted it, and everybody was calling them crows. I'm like, those aren't crows, my friend. These are much bigger birds than crows. The Ravens are they're impressive. And like all of them they're all tagged. They keep track of the Ravens in there, and they're all used to people, so they don't freak out. Like you get, I had a bunch of pictures of like a raven right there, standing right next to me. So I was super impressed. London in general blew my mind. It's like I've been over to Europe. I had not been to London, but every time I go over there, I'm just like, it's a different vibe. It's just a completely different vibe. It's just unbelievable I'm a big fan. I could easily move to London and be
Yeah,
part
I
of it.
could too. I enjoyed the crowd.
Yeah, it was
And
great.
you know what? Another thing, maybe it's just because I was living in the hotels in the business district, but boy, everybody was dressed well,
Oh
really,
yeah.
really well. But
Oh
you got a guy, Travis Williamson, just sent a question. Did I know? He's asking if I knew John Burge, Cassidy, Boudreaux from the CPD. Obviously, he's referring to the Burge cases,
yeah.
and I never knew them personally, but of course, I became aware of what they were doing through the news media. And like most cops, uh, the stories that were coming out, I found it when I was a cop. I'm saying, is this true? I mean, electric shock? Are they really using some electric shock on people to get convictions? But I was dealing with my own problems in Area 5 at the
Right.
time.
Yeah.
Okay. But I did, after I retired, I did work on some of the Burge cases, some of the exonerations. So I
Yeah.
became more aware of it
I don't
later.
think Burge had quite the number that Guevara did, but the
No,
shit that
no,
they
no
did
way.
was
No way.
horrific.
He
Horrific.
was not even close. But what is wrongfully to put one person in prison or 50 in prison? You're a bad guy.
Yeah, you're a bad dude.
You
There's
did
no
it for
question
wrong
about
reasons, and accountability should have been there, but it's not there because the city would have to be on trial as a co-conspirator with Guevara,
it. No doubt. No
and
question about it.
so it's better to pay out the money and keep everybody silent because for them they'll be happy. Like one state's attorney told me, Bill, we can't wait for Guevara to die because then it's over for them.
Yeah.
There
Well,
won't
I
be
mean,
any
if the
accountability.
guy's walking around collecting a pension, it's repugnant, man. It's like that
Yeah.
concept is like
Yeah,
so
and
gross.
talking about a pension, Bob, I got to get going because I've been up now early in the morning all the time, so I've used it to my advantage. I went out and got a job. I'm
Hey,
I'm, I'm delivering newspapers now in the morning, so I
wait,
got
they
to
still have
fight.
newspapers over in Europe? They actually have
Oh
paper?
yeah, we sure we do. Sure,
Oh, that's
we have
amazing.
newspapers. I
Well,
can't read them, but
are you gonna get on your little bike? The little
yeah, the
bell? Bing,
Cyrillic
bing.
language is difficult for Bill Dorsch.
I love it.
My translators are 5 and 6-year-old kids. They're speaking English, Bulgarian, Russian. You know, they're going to school taking German or Japanese. Just they're amazing with the
Yeah.
languages here.
It's like I got to get to where you're at too. That's on the short list. So, all right, Bill, I love you, man. Thank you for hanging, getting up.
And people, we
On.
will be better prepared next week for you. But in the meantime, on Amazon, don't forget me
I'll make it
and write
bigger.
those reviews. I appreciate it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
definitely.
And
That's
good
a big
night,
thing.
all.
All right, Bill. We'll see you. All right, guys. To my mods, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you so much. I've missed you guys. So yeah, we'll go live with Boone tomorrow. I'll pull up the I believe it's a motion to suppress. I read the state's response. It's short. We'll go through those first, and then we'll dive right into the hearing. I'll put the live together at about 1:30 my time tomorrow. So keep an eye out for that. Spread the word. Make sure you're sharing, subscribing, all the YouTube things that we need you to do. Afton, Tiff, thank you guys. Of course, Missy and Tracy, thank you. I know that you guys, and both of you, I think you're supposed to have backstage passes so that if one or both of you want to help me back here tomorrow during the live, I might have to give you a seat. But let me know in the Discord if that's what you guys like. I think I have to maybe give you a seat in StreamYard if you guys want to jump back with me, if one or both of you want to jump back with me, help me out. It's always helpful to have somebody back here with me. But thank you guys for all your hard work. I really appreciate all of you. Tiff, am I missing any other mods here? If I missed you, just know that I love you. And I've missed you guys. I've missed you guys. I'm glad I'm back. Getting really nervous about the whole Delphi thing. That's like a month of my life. I'm trying to work out all the arrangements where I'm going to stay, getting into that courtroom on the daily. I did reach out. I talked to Andrea last night. We're definitely going to do some stuff together while we're there. So it will be very, very interesting. Travis, I want to make sure I shout you out, my friend. Thank you for your email. It was very informative. I started digging into it today. Um, I always appreciate you, man. Always, and especially the amount of research and work that you do. And then you're kind enough to share it. And thank you, Kenny. I see you. I see you here. And it's Bob. Mr. Mott is my dad. So you guys are the best. I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for hanging. And we will see you tomorrow. We'll have some daytime fun. Little of the daytime fun. I always love that. And I know the crew loves it too. All right, you guys. You guys are the best. Because without you, I'm just an old man talking about a whole bunch of cases. See you All right, Bill.